Mother's Day. Ladies, come on by, too. We are the Out of Bounds Show. We welcome in Steve Robertson, genespage.com, 247 Sports. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. So, is this the biggest hire in the history of Mississippi State athletics?
I think you can make that argument. Blessed with the gift of hindsight, we would say maybe Ben Howland wasn't, but his resume at the time was outstanding. He had 3 Final Fours and very accomplished coach, but he was out of coaching. But what Zach Selman has done is gone out and hired a coach, a sitting head coach, Power 4 head coach, and lured them away from their school. In that respect. And so it wasn't like Virginia was trying to get rid of Brian O'Connor. They tried very, very hard over the course of the last week to reach some type of agreement on the revenue sharing side and scholarship side, and so they made it very difficult. But Zach Selman pulled it off, and is to be commended.
When did you know? All right. When did Mississippi State know that they had won the battle from the back and forth on Virginia trying to keep him?
Well, it wasn't really official until Saturday, but when we got together last time, it was pretty much an understanding. It was about working through the language of the contract and things of that nature. And I had somebody tell me on Tuesday evening that they really felt like this was going to happen. Things are really trending in a very positive way, and A&M got involved on Wednesday. And that's what's, I wrote about that yesterday in the, now that it's over piece, but, this was not a scenario where State gets him by default. This is a situation where not only did State have to beat Virginia to get him, they had to kind of deal with A&M for about 12 hours, and so, I was told, I guess it was Wednesday, it all runs together after a while, but that Zach Selman had gone to Dr. Keenum and said, hey, here's what we need to do. Here's what the situation we're in. And that Keenum said, okay, go hire our coach. And then from that point forward, it was pretty much, an expectation. And, what a huge, huge development for Mississippi State fans. It's just, a lot of people have said, we're just not where we need to be or where we want to be. But these are the kinds of moves that kind of validate what Mississippi State people think about themselves.
Yeah, they've never done this. Cohen was a big hire, but it also came at a time where, kind of the legendary head coach was throwing a fit about who he wanted. So it was very messy, even though Cohen was super successful, and that was a total rebuild. Whereas O'Connor's walking into a little bit different deal, and he can fill this thing up with portal transfers and so on. So totally different. What's the final compensation deal? Is it 1.7-ish with incentives, or did they go to $2 million with incentives? What did they land on?
Yeah, well, we haven't been given the financials just yet, and I suspect we will, between now and Thursday. That's just, it's one of those things where there's always a little something in there that the university is always very careful with how they present things. So I don't know if we know the full financials until we get into Thursday, but we're working to get that information. But we were told from the beginning of this process that Dr. Mark Keenum was willing to give a top 10 salary and go as high as $2 million a year to get the right coach. And you hear a lot of that with this stuff, right? And you wonder, is it just chatter, right? Is it all just kind of propaganda to say, hey, we're going to do the best we can, and then you come up a little bit short and you say, well, this was the right guy, But for Mississippi State to go big game fishing the way they did, to make the financial commitment ahead of the search, as soon as we get ready to go and say, we're willing to go as high as $2 million, and then to see something like that take place, it's not very Mississippi State, tradition. It's just been like you hired Mike Leach right away from Washington State, and I remember us talking then that this is not a real Mississippi State thing to do. State typically gets the up-and-comer out there, but this is kind of in that same vein where there was a commitment made to go get the absolute best coach they could possibly get, and I don't care what else happens around the country, nobody's going to make a better hire than this. A guy that's been to the College World Series, 7 times.
Yeah.
That's pretty remarkable. There's not many people in the country that have a resume that are anywhere comparable to what Brian O'Connor has.
All right, who's going to be the next pitching coach for Brian O'Connor?
I think we'll get some clarity on that probably today or tomorrow. I had somebody that spoke to O'Connor yesterday on campus and said, hey, I know there's a lot of reports out there, but I haven't hired a pitching coach yet. That may just be semantics, you know what I mean, just to kind of protect his pitching coach. We still expect Corey Muscara to be very much in the middle of that from Wake Forest. They played yesterday, and so these conversations happen while all that's going on. But I do know that Justin Parker, still engaged and was still involved yesterday in some baseball functions. So there's always that possibility. But I have no doubt that Brian O'Connor will make a good decision in that respect, and he'll get a great pitching coach. He was a great pitching coach himself.
But you feel like it's Muscara?
Yeah, I do. I'd be surprised if it wasn't.
Okay. What about what's the latest on? Have you heard anything on Ace Reese in the bidding war? I would think the hire of Brian O'Connor bodes well for Mississippi State. I don't know much about McMullen, but he's been with BOC for a long time. Have you heard anything about that? You said last week or the week before, and other people in the program have told me that his parents love it and he loves it at Mississippi State. Is there anything on Ace Reese to report?
Well, I'm still optimistic that all works itself out. I did have a chance to speak with his dad when we were down in Tallahassee, and I didn't, push him for any information. I kind of joked with him. I said, hey, do I need to make your plate or anything while I'm down here? Let you guys know you appreciate it. But no, I think it's going to work out. I think a lot of it is the fact that Ace is happy here. He's a kid from Canton, Texas. His family's gotten very involved with other baseball parents, and that's kind of a group within the group, right? I mean, that's a really good group of people that get really close and spend basically every weekend together. And I think Ace and his family really feel like they're part of the family here in many respects. But we'll see how things go. But I'm optimistic that things work out there.
All right, we got another minute here with Steve Robertson, GenesPage.com. What about McPherson and Foster? You feel like that'll work out and they'll be back as Diamond Dogs?
Yeah, I think so. And, exit meetings, and it's kind of weird to have the new coach doing the exit meetings. So I guess it's kind of a one-on-one sit down. Those meetings are expected to start this morning. Matter of fact, I think they've already started, and they'll run through tomorrow. And of course, McPherson and Foster are a big part of that. And, those are guys that, Lamonis and Park went out and got, so the relationship was there. But, of course, Brian O'Connor's a guy that's got an incredible resume. He didn't have to introduce himself. And so I think those situations probably work out, too. And, we've got to be very competitive. And maybe this year, because there is transition, maybe you've got to be a little bit over-aggressive. You overpay a little bit because you want to make sure Brian O'Connor has the bullets in the gun to get off to a great start.
Steve Robertson, GenesPage.com, 247 Sports. He's all over football recruiting and all the baseball transactions. Steve, we'll get you again later in the week. Thank you, man.
See you.
GenesPage.com, 247 Sports. Steve Robertson joined us on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. The Golden Moon Casino text line, we want to hear from you, is 601-885-3776. We've got a big party this afternoon at Raggio Mercantile Shop in Madison from 5 to 7. Have a little Elijah Craig bourbon and some Michelob Ultra, and you get to see all the cool stuff at Raggio Mercantile Shop in Madison, Mississippi.